Oh, I gotta put the record back on. So so tell me what is, right, I'm trying to get your question right now. I had a little system breakdown, so let me just get there and to see where my question ended up. Where your question ended up. My fancy system.
I actually just registered this morning. So
No. Listen, I got it. I was hesitant to even put the this meeting out because it was too last minute. But next Saturday, that other people will be here probably, because it was for me a decision, an impulse decision that I said, well, maybe somebody will be worth it to spend their time with me this morning, right? And look at that. Let's see what you said. Okay, another trailhead account or to redo modules that we've already completed a long time ago. Trying to prepare for the admin exam. Need best way to really absorb everything. Yeah, so I do think. Let me show you. I'll show you 2 ways. Now, when did you complete your class? Or do you still have that award from your class or no?
Wait, which class?
I don't know. What do you have your question was create another trailhead account to redo modules if we have already completed them for a long time ago. You talking about in Trailhead itself?
Yeah, in Trailhead itself. Like, so just a little bit about me, just to give you like a quick thing about me. I took the Maravis admin cohort back in June, July timeframe. So then I completed all those modules like several months ago.
Yeah.
And then now I'm just kind of like, no, I need to take the exam second try, like I just really need to absorb everything. So yeah, basically my question was, should I go through those modules again, that way get a better understanding, and just kind of I guess watch a bunch of the Trailhead live videos to prepare?
I mean, there's no yes or no answer to that.
Okay.
It's fine. What you were, let me share my screen, right? Because that would make for a good Zoom meeting. Yeah, Dominic. So good morning. Why are you doing that? I've discovered in the last 2 weeks, juggling 3 Zoom accounts is tough. I don't know why they're so much a pain in the recruits. Let's see something here. So the first thing is you don't necessarily have to get a new Trailhead account to do it. But I get what you're saying, right? You want to, because do you know a trail that you're talking about, like you want to retake?
The admin, like preparing for your admin exam. Hold on, let me look it up.
Yeah, so we go and we're looking at, so there's a couple ways to do it. And let's say, so there's a bunch. Actually, if we go to trail mixes, I still don't like their trail mix. Let's go to a trail mix. There we go. Okay, so there's one done by Salesforce, which pretty much is all the same as everybody else. Mine's a copy, right? But a lot of people have their own trail mixes. So first of all, when you're studying for the prep, definitely use the ones built by the Trailhead team. Even though they're the same trails, they may include information that's really good, right? So their question was, should I create a new Trailhead account to do all this stuff? No, not necessarily, but you've already done them. I think if you've already completed, just like mine, right? I'm looking at mine. A lot of times you can go, so there's 2 ways that you can review the content. And that, you can just go in and review your completed content. That's not hard. What's hard is you can't retake the little quizzes, right?
Yeah.
So you go through the trail. Wow, this is a long trail. And there's sometimes you can redo the quizzes. So you can do what's called retake the challenge.
Okay.
And if you retake a challenge, it's one of the hands-on challenges, which I really like, by the way. And all you need to do, if you know your trailhead playgrounds, I got a bunch of trailhead playgrounds, right? So
Yeah.
I tend to name them for the specific super badge or project that they are to keep them organized. But even then, I mess up and I jack them up and I end up with a merged one. And so even if that's the case, then what I would say is just create a new trailhead playground inside the org, not a whole new trailhead account. Is that what you were talking about?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, basically like that. And then are you only allowed to have like 10 trailhead or 10 playgrounds total?
Something like that, yeah.
Okay, okay.
But that's fine. You shouldn't need that many more, right?
Okay, yeah.
And so I've got this merged one that probably, if you want to check the challenge, it doesn't matter because you can just go and redo the challenge. So
Okay.
a lot of times if you want to redo them, it's great. What you can't do in Trailhead is retake the quizzes, but Dominic's got a hack for that. So if you found yourself like wanting to retake one that has a quiz,
Yeah.
so you can redo that part of the trailhead with a new playground, not a problem. So they're 500. These are 500 point. If they're 500 points, they're always a project. Like they're always to be done.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to find one that's not a Q&A because I want to show you exactly how I retake tests all the time in Trailhead so that, there's module. Let's just go to this one, right? It's just a question. It's easier. And you want to see that little quiz. You can't retake the quiz. Well, it's another $500 one. Wow. 500 point one. I don't know if it's in dollars. Okay. Let's hit this one. I'm really doing a stellar job. See if that is. Okay.
Oh, there you go.
So here we go. Here's one you can't retake the test.
Yeah.
So what I do is I click on the URL, I right click and copy, and then I simply open up an incognito browser. Because remember, all I want to do is see the quiz, correct? And in order to see the quiz, I just need to go to that trailhead without having logged in, and then you'll get the quiz again. You won't get to take it again without logging in with a new account. But do you need that? Do you need the question and answer? And then again, my strategy for learning Salesforce to prepare is to then go and I'll show you this. What happened? Skip that for now. So it says the company information page is where you can find blah, blah, blah. So that's great. Here, I'm even gonna squoze that. And then we're just gonna reorganize my browsers a little bit, right? And then I'm gonna go back to ye old, and I'm just doing this all in Trailhead.
Okay.
So remember with the 500 point challenges, because I just hadn't done this before. If you can retake the challenge and then choose which, let's see which one. That's my personal org. That's why I was checking. So you could just relaunch one of your playgrounds and then go do what's going to really help you the most, which is go look at the company information page and see what you find, right? Look for the 4 things that they asked for, because Patricia, that's the only way to learn it. Like learn it not to pass the test, but learn it like to know it, right? To understand, to get your fingers on.
Right.
So, and that's not the best example, but it's not bad, right? So I go, so I type in company information page. Oops, come on now. And waiting for my browser to catch up with my keystrokes.
Yeah, there you go.
So now look, this is the company information section, the company settings section.
Mhm.
So whatever area it takes you into, make sure that you look at everything that's there, right? So in my quick find,
Okay.
the company settings, this is important to understand for the test too. When they ask you a question about the company information page, it's going to be about the company information page, right?
Mhm.
Because that's what the question was about. But take a minute to absorb everything that's around it, right? Because that's what they're really trying to test you for. Salesforce is this massive collection of settings, right? When you hit the setup menu, there's a massive collection of different declarative settings. Yes.
Yes.
So company settings or company information is categorized under company settings. So soak it in. What are the things, if they took you to company information, what are they not asking about? Well, they're not asking in this question, they're not asking about business hours. They're not asking about a public calendar, which in class, we don't even talk about that much, but they're all separate things. Your domain, your language settings, holiday, blah, blah, blah. So it's, in order to study, it's not a matter of getting through the practice questions and answers or the trails, but like getting to the spot that they're talking about
Mhm.
and then spending a little time getting some clicks in. So first and foremost, I'm going to open that in a new tab just so I can show you focus on what they asked for in the question first, right? Like focus on that and then look for each of the answers, because some of those answers you'll find and they'll work and they'll look right, right? And then you got to choose which one of these seems better. But the other answer is all the things you can't find, all the things you can't do that they said were one of the answers. Because when you go to try to find those things in Salesforce, right? So let's look, for example, it says company information page where you can find your org ID. So I'm on the company information page and I can see, oh, there's my Salesforce organization ID.
Mhm.
Let me click down there. Right?
Right.
So, okay, that's true. But is A the only answer? Well, let's look. B says licenses available. So if I go and look at the whole page, right, I'll see, oh, the licenses, total, used, remaining. That's available, right?
Mhm.
Makes sense. So you're starting to create the connection between what the answers look like and what it is they're talking about in the system. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it does.
Information on important limits such as data and file usage. Well, let's just see. Is there information on data and file usage? Well, I don't know if I see it just yet, but let's see. I've got
There it is. Oh,
what?
yeah.
Yes, of course it's there,
Must be.
right? That's
Mhm.
that experience, Patricia, is the learning chemical just went off in your brain,
Yes.
right? Oh, there it is. Oh, there it is. Oh, there it is. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Is the chemical that says that's not a real answer. I looked all over for that. And if you don't find it enlightening, here's another little study tip. So if you don't find the thing they're talking about in the lightning, you've
Mhm.
got to switch to the classic setup model. And you're like, Dominic, this is getting hard. I'm like, yeah, Salesforce is hard.
Yeah.
So you switch over to classic, and then you start finding things that are only in the classic setup menu that you can't find in Lightning. How come? Because you looked, right? Remember, there's two mechanisms to look for things in Salesforce. In the setup menu, you've got the quick find, but you've also got search setup. So if you see something like competitors in one of the questions, remember there's something in well,
R.
there's some, yeah. So you could see, well, there's some objects named competitor, but there's in global search for setup, there's really not a lot with competitors. So it doesn't exist. Salesforce is asking a question about something that doesn't exist. You could assume that, or you could say, let me check the classic, because classic, under opportunities is this thing called competitors. You see the difference?
Yeah.
So you didn't find anything in lightning. You didn't find competitor. There's nothing there. You went to global search to find competitor. All you found was some objects, but then when you did a search, like that's it. There's 3 fields that you could find in an object. There's a competitor asset, a competitor name, and a main competitors. These are where they live. Okay, but you could go to those things. You could backtrack your way. That might, dig around. Like this is a weird. When things start to look weird, you're probably not a place, right? That's there. So you could say, okay, the competitor name is part of the Einstein Opportunity Insight field. All right, what object is that on? Opportunity Insights object is what it's going to take you. You're going to find your way somewhere, right? It's going to take you around. And the more you sort of absorb the page you found yourself on, the more you'll kind of notice it as you'll start to just absorb what's there. You can obviously see that that field was from an object. And I'm saying it like obvious. If you don't obviously see it, that's okay. You will eventually obviously see it. What I'm saying is you'll see, I'm in an object. I'm in this, I'm in that, right? Or then you go to the competitor, you go to classic, you find it, and you go, what is this? No competitor pick list. Click on new, and you can start to play with whatever area that the question was talking about. Because if you don't know it off the top of your head, it's all new and unfamiliar territory. So you've got to explore, right? You got to look around, explore, see where the answers take you, and see if you can absorb what all those things are. Does that make sense?
No, it does. Yeah.
And by the way, like the other piece of it that I was saying with the company. So we went and we diagnosed the question to find out that yes, the answer is all of the above, because all of the other answers were true. Therefore, D became true, right? Hurrah! Hold on. That was just that question. Pay attention to where you are in the next place. So I can see business hours are part of the category company settings. Calendar settings are another subcategory. And as you explore these things, go take a look. Oh, I got a default. I could set other business hours. I could create, a public calendar for what's a public calendar? Company events. It might be employees that want their birthday published. And resources are things like conference rooms, projectors, other hard assets that people need to share. You could literally create a calendar for those things so that people can schedule where that thing's going to be, who's got it, when they're going to get it, and when they're going to bring it back, right? Because that's what a calendar invitation communicates: who, what, where, when, and all of that fun stuff. So it's a great time to kind of see what all the other things that are in that neighborhood, right? What are all the other things in the neighborhood called company information that I might need to distinguish between on a test? What's on a company information page is only a little bit of what they might ask you about. Remember, on the test, they're really going to ask you as much about what is not the answer to make sure you know that that's not the answer as well.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, those are good tips. Yes, thank you.
So knowing what the answer is not is as important as knowing what the answer is. Let's see. So what are the 3 main categories in the setup menu? This is good, right?
Yeah.
Let's go look at that. Let's see what that means. 3 main categories. It looks like administration, platform tools, and settings. Let's see what it.
Okay.
Let's see if that's true.
Oh, yeah.
It's administration, but what?
Yeah.
But now go look. Let's go look at something else. So we got that C's the answer. Huzzah.
Mhm.
Happy candy in the brain, right?
Yeah.
Let's look at what the other ones are. Object management, preferences, and groups. And then look and see is, well, there's object management is a whole different tab, not a section of the tab.
Okay.
Well, let's find out where groups are. Like where are preferences? I don't even know if that's a real thing. Like the whole setup is preferences.
Oh.
I've got prospector preferences.
Yeah.
I've got, let me just check preferences. It looks like there's only one thing that has preferences in it, and I'm keeping it simple, right? I'm looking in the way the tool allows me to look quickly. Oh, yeah, there's a couple preferences. I've got same one. Oh, clean has some preferences. Oh, wait, there's some resource preferences inside field services, but that looks like something else altogether. I can now eliminate answer A because those things look different than what I've already found as the answer, right? But let's say we started with A. We're like, we don't know. Like, well, okay, let's keep checking because those things didn't look like they were categories in the setup menu, right? Those are things that are in. I had to go search in different places. So your brain's going to associate a little. That seems weird as an answer, but check them all out, right? User management. Let's see how that goes. Hang on a second. Whoops. God bless you, honey. I'm on the recording, so I didn't want to yell it out. So let's see. User management, settings, and security. I'm like, okay, well, let's go check that out. Let's just see. So if I look and I go user management, user management settings. I don't know. Let's type it in. Let's find the same methodology. So I'm going to type in security first because I know security is actually a category, but it's not. So there's security. It's got a little drop down, but it seems to be, if I were really to look at where that lives, there's security. It's a subset of settings. So settings looks like a category because it's got a different look and feel, right? There's three things. There's some settings here, but then I've got 1, 2, 3. So starting to look good, but you also want to put your eyes and your hands on everything else. So there's my settings. And there's security. Okay, that's something different. That looks different. So it probably acts different. So it's probably not one of the things. It's not the same as settings, right? So you see how I'm analyzing it?
Yeah.
And then user management is like, well, all my user stuff is here. And there's my user management settings under user. Okay, that one's out. And then you go app exchange, profiles, and customizations. Well, I can see profiles and then customizations. The truth is, customizations is more of a classic way to look at it. There's a whole customization setting under build. Now, remember, you look in classic, they don't organize all the data the same way. They've got administer, they've got build, deploy, and monitor with the 4 big categories. That's classic. This is a lightning because none of the answers are even close. So I can actually see, and if you know where the app exchange is, it doesn't live. You can go to the app exchange marketplace. All right, I see that. And I can do app exchange. There it is. So I could get to the app exchange marketplace, but you see what I'm saying? So you've now not only given your brain the candy for finding the right answer, but you've also reinforced that right answer feeling with the pleasure of not finding all the other answers. It's reinforcing the right answer you found. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
And there's no way you're going to because even if you don't remember the 3 things off the top of your head, you're going to remember something about, oh yeah, groups. Groups are over there in users, right? I mean, I remember that. If I type in groups, that's one I didn't do yet. Groups are part of users, feature settings, right? All that kind of stuff. So you're giving your brain lots of reference points, all pointing to that right answer feeling. That's why I say use focus on fours, use the question and answers, but don't use it to study the answer. Use it to study and remember use it to study the system so that you know the answer. Because I don't think you've been in one of my classes yet, or heard me say this in the test prep, but the way to pass the test is not pick any of the wrong answers. That's the simplest way to pass the test. But in order to do that, you've got to understand what the wrong answers are. And the way you study that is you go and test every answer, and you'll know by finger and click and visual, I remember groups. Groups was a lot of things, right? That's very different than one big category of things, right? A big category is going to be a big bucket. Houses, cars, trailers. Those are categories of where people could live, maybe, or something, right? Whatever you want to categorize. Those are very different than wheels, tires, and paint color, which are characteristics of those categories. And anyway, so that's just me pontificating about it. But does that help you a little bit?
No, it really does. Yeah, thank you.
You're good. Because that's one of and that, by the way, that's the way I would review trails.
Okay.
Is not so much the information, but the considerate destinations. Like, go to the trail and go touch what they're talking about. Go follow the steps in the exercises they give you. But the beautiful thing about, like, in the trail, there's always going to be, like, especially if there's a challenge, the way most challenges work is they take you through, let's see, this one happens to be creating a trailhead playground, and then installing the Dream app, blah, blah, blah. So then you're going to, they usually always give you instructions on, like, what to do. So go do it. Like, go follow, go to the gear icon, click the object manager, click contact, click new. All right. So you just go do it. Like, I'm in the object manager. I'm going to click, just follow the steps, and then notice as you do what you're doing. Like, take a little time instead of being so hyper focused on, because I do this, by the way, I had to learn from me being this kind of person. I'm not, right. Mm-hmm. Look around and say, what is all here? Oh, I could see, here's in the object manager, there's all the objects. How do I know? Because these names look familiar. And I guess some of them do and some of them don't know. I know what they are, but you're starting to understand what you're looking at as a grouping and what that hierarchy of presentation of information means, right? And then you might notice schema builder, create, what are those things? Custom object from a spreadsheet, wow, those are all cool things. Notice it says a custom object from a spreadsheet. That's a feature they released a couple of years ago. That's a manual process that you'll never, because there's a question on the test that I always remember. It said, something will automatically create fields. And I giggled because I had to set up I set up organizations for people, and I have to create custom fields. I'm like, is there a way to create fields automatically? And there is. It's right here, custom object from spreadsheet, because you create the object and the fields. But, I had to go play with that to satisfy my curiosity of what that was. But then there was no other place to create automated fields. Like, that would be crazy to create fields. Why? Because in this exercise, we're actually asked to create a field. And if you do that enough, right? If you do creating fields, if you follow the steps, right? Mm-hmm. This is the only method to create fields, that new button, right? That's it. You created all the fields in an object from a spreadsheet with that thing you noticed at one time in camp, blah, blah, blah. Or curiosity. I happen to be walking by that booth at Dreamforce, right? But those are things that will stick out in your brain. Oh, thank you so much. Those are things that'll stick out in your brain if that if you study with that methodology. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. Yeah. Thanks.
Because the trailhead information is a story about what they're pointing you to, so you understand the context of how it's used, but really getting your fingers on it in the system is where you create hand-eye mind coordination and memory, and to the point where you'll remember it even if you don't know it, because there'll be some experience there with it.
Yeah.
So, all right, enough of me pontificating. Patricia, since you're the only person in Q&A right now, what other questions do you have? Did you get stumped on that you'd like me, maybe I have some slides or have some ways to explain some of this information that might be helpful?
Well,
You
I
know,
don't
you're my
I
star
can't-
student right now, so take advantage of it.
I can't think of anything right. I gotta bring in more questions for next week.
Yeah, well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
The biggest, toughest one all the time
Mhm.
is a thing called the security model,
Oh yeah, for sure.
right?
Yes.
Let's see if I can do this. So I'm gonna do a new share. And I don't have my iPad with me. Do I have my iPad with me? I do. Hoorah. Give me a second.
Okay.
Because I have a way to explain the security model that I think you'll find fascinating, or you'll think I'm out of my mind. Wait. Thank goodness. Okay.
I tried to watch the Who Sees What video, but it's hard for me to follow sometimes.
There's like 7 of them.
I
I'm going
know.
to explain who sees what in just a minute.
Okay.
Let's see if this will do it. La 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 la. There we go. Okay. Hang on, now I gotta get my little pen. Okay. So let's talk about a couple of things right off the bat about security. Number one, what's unique in Salesforce, I'm gonna do it differently. Every record, let's talk about what a record is, right? So a record, if we think about where a record comes from, let's talk about this. So let's see. So a record, we think about what an object is. An object, so we'll talk about this, right? So this is good. So a table of data is columns. Wait, I should probably, let's see. See if this makes sense. Okay, so what makes an object is that it's a spreadsheet, right? Really is what an object is. It's a spreadsheet. It's a spreadsheet with a lot more rules is what it is, right? So an object is a table of data. And tell me, Patricia, have you worked with spreadsheets before?
No.
Ever?
Well, yes. I use Excel.
Okay. How good do you think you are at Excel? Like, you understand when you open up a spreadsheet, that's a whole, like every worksheet is a little table of data, right?
Yes.
Right? It's a series of columns and rows. What's in the column at the top is the headings, right? So this part of it has each column heading is a different. Why do you have column headings in a spreadsheet? Why don't you just put everything, wherever you want?
It'll be a mess.
It would be a mess, which is what a Word document is, right? A Word document is a way to capture data any way you want in a mess. So we put them in an organized mess called a spreadsheet, so that, the name, the ID is here, the name, I want your name, I want your phone number, I want your address, right? You start to look like how you organize your spreadsheets, yes?
Yes.
And then every line, every row is another record. It's my ID is one. I'm gonna do it here. My one, I got number two, I got number three, blah, blah, blah. I got Bob, I got Carol, I got Jane, blah, 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 blah. Right? And what's the big frustration with spreadsheets? That's a perfectly workable system. This is a big picture. I'm going big picture on you. What's the problem with spreadsheets is people like Bob. You've never been in one of my classes, but have you ever sent a spreadsheet out where you asked for the phone number and Bob decided to put the digits and then he wrote a note, don't call after 7. You know, Bob, you know what I'm talking about? We've all been Bob at some point in our lives, right? We put data where we could, not where we should. Yes?
Yeah.
And it messed up our data. It didn't make sense when we sorted by column and all that. It didn't make sense. All that being said, Salesforce is just a very rigid kind of data. If this is phone number, it's only going to take 10 digits, right? It's only going to take certain data. So it's sales forcing you to put better quality data in. And every one of those records shows up on a page to a user. Correct? When you open a record in Salesforce, you're just having a pretty look, right? You're having a pretty look at that record in Salesforce. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So that is called the page layout in Salesforce. Now I'm explaining the structure of Salesforce so I can explain the security model in just a second. Ready?
Mhm.
So when you're looking at a record, where did you find that record? How did you get access to that object? That object was in a folder called, that was available. That object had a tab, right? Remember you clicked it on the tab?
Mhm.
That object had a name like accounts or contacts from the navigation menu.
Yeah.
And then to the left of that navigation menu, and I'm drawing it all the way up here because I didn't plan this out. Remember those 9 dots?
Yeah.
You remember what that's called in Salesforce?
No.
So the 9 dots up the upper left-hand corner, are you looking at an org right now?
I am. I'm actually pulling it up right now.
Pull up the 9 dots and notice what the name is on those 9 dots.
The app launcher.
Exactly. So it's launching an app. So all of the tabs, and I'm in Salesforce now, so I can't see it. Let's see, can I do a split share? Hold on, let me go back for a second. Because I got my goofy one, right? I mean, I'll go back to my whiteboard in a second. So when I click on those 9 dots, I see the app launcher. These are all my apps. And if you're like, what is an app? Well, let's go click and look, right? So I got my sales app, which, right, is part of it. Okay, an app is nothing but a collection of tabs. Okay.
Okay.
So the reason I'm going through this is this. As you start to look at what's different about sales versus marketing, the tabs are in a different order. The different tabs are there. But when I look at opportunities in marketing and opportunities in sales, by the way, and the reason I'm saying this, I'm telling one on myself. Even as a trainer on projects as little as 5 years ago, with only a few years on my very first Salesforce project in a long time, I thought there might be something different with the accounts tab in the service object versus the accounts tab in the sales object. Right? Do you ever have that thought? Like, is that the same? It's in a different tab. Is it the same things or is it not? Right? And in Classic, we used to look at it like this. So classic, the object picker was the app picker was here on the blue dot. So that accounts tab looks this, I mean, I think it's the same. Let's see, where's mine? Sales service. I never, like, because it was look different, I thought it might actually be different, but it's the same. What you start to learn is, oh, accounts is accounts is accounts. Wherever I see it, I'm just adding accounts to the application. So you learn that an application is nothing but a collection of navigation tabs at a big fluffy, that's a big fluffy definition.
Okay.
Now, I said all that so that I could tell you about the security model. So anyway, so that's the terminology and the structure that we see, correct?
Mhm.
All right, so when I say, so when I'm looking at a record, which is nothing but a translation of the data from these rows, right? There's an ID field here. We're putting it on the page, the name. We're just translating that from a spreadsheet to a page that we have, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I said all that so that I could, can I save this now? I like this little diagram. No, all right, so let's see. What does this do? I'm gonna close all that out. Goodbye drawing. I did all that, so you can say this. Okay, so what were some of the things that we looked at? I needed, in order to see a record on a page with the fields, right? In order to see a record, I needed, here's the ingredients. I needed an application.
Okay.
That application is all an app is a collection of tabs.
Mhm.
Tabs just represent, equal what an object.
Okay.
And then when I want to look at when I get access to the tab, I'm going to do it so that I can open up a page layout of, I guess the word is, Dominic. The page is a view where I'm looking at a record, which has fields. I'm about to explain the security model to you, right? Okay. When you think of your entire organization, everybody that works in your company, do you want, so now we have a record. We have a record that we're looking at in Salesforce. And you understand the journey that it took to get there, correct?
Yes.
All right. So that record is how do it, I'm gonna say I'm gonna say that record, how am I gonna say this? All right. So the question then becomes, to view that record and all of its fields on the page layout, and I'm gonna draw it like a lightning page layout for a second, go back to that little image. A record has some interesting characteristics. Number one, it's every record has an owner. Correct?
Yes.
Every record has an owner. What is an owner? It's one of your users. Now, that's important to understand because every user record has a couple of unique characteristics as well, right? Besides as it relates to the data, there are two components of a user record that are critical as it relates to the data itself. Obviously, you have to have a license. Well, let's talk about some of the characteristics of a user record. And I'm going to switch for a second. Well, no, I'll keep on this for a second. So in order for a user to access a record, what are some of the elements that they need? What do they have to be, first of all, first and foremost? What's one of the key characteristics of a user to access a record? How do you, what's the first step in looking at, like, what's the first step? If you want to look at a record right now,
Okay.
what's the first thing you have to do?
Hang on, I'm pulling that up. Okay.
What'd you do before you did all that pulling up stuff? What was the first thing you had to do?
Look it up.
Before you could even look it up, what's the first thing you had to do in order to look at a record? After you turn your computer on, after you launch Chrome, where do you go next?
I don't know. I'm sorry.
You had to log into Salesforce first, right?
Yes.
So the steps of record access are first. The first thing you have to do is you have to log in. Does that make sense? That's a whole category of information you need to understand. First, you have to log in. What are the, think about, I'm not going to go too deep, right? The second thing you have to do is, right, once you've successfully logged in, then you've got to access the app. Whoops. Or not, like you typically access the application you want to do your job, right? Mm-hmm. So your app is related to your job and what you need to do. And then you click the tab of the object you want to see, right? To see the process you're going through. And then you select the record. You select the record. And that opens up the page. Whoops, we'll do this. And then you can see the fields. You've done that before. Does that all make sense to you as a process? Yeah. Log in, choose the application, click on the tab, find the record, select the record, view it on the page. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, all of those things are controlled in Salesforce. Who gets to log in? Which apps are available to them, the tabs that are in that app, the records, and then the view of the page. Whoops. Which actually means also the fields. I'm running out of space. The fields. So what are the two things that control all of that behavior in Salesforce? Is the profile. As it relates to doing all of those things, the permission, you have to have permission to do all of those things. And permissions, all permissions are gathered up in a profile or permission sets. Do you remember that piece of the explanation?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna share back to my screen to walk through again. So I said all that because that is important. You, the user, I'm gonna open that if I can in any tab. So you, the user, owns a record. The way you got access to that record was because you're an active user, able to log in, able to see that application, able to see that tab, able to see that record, and then able to view that on the page. Okay. And where you look at all that on your user record, that's all controlled by your profile. And the role in the profile control everything you can do in Salesforce besides your license, right? It's a subset. Mm-hmm. So these four characteristics of your user record control everything you see and do in Salesforce. Okay. You have to have you have to have a license. You have to be active. That license has a profile, which is your set of permissions, right? That what the things you can see and do in Salesforce, and then record access will be determined by your role. for the most part, not, you know, all your other access. I think I complicated my explanation where I was headed with this thing. So I'm going to get back to my I'm going to get back to my quick and easy, but that's the core structure of how things happen in Salesforce, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. No, yeah, and I'm glad you're like showing me in the org. So yeah.
Yeah. So okay. So if I'm a user, let's see something real quick because I la 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 la. Oh, there we go. So let me go to setup. So now let me talk about the security model. So first off, understanding that is really good because when you understand that user experience, if you will, that user journey to get in the org, to access a tab, all of that stuff is controlled by permissions. Well, the biggest chunk of permissions is a profile. Why does Salesforce use profiles? Because it groups. Salesforce is all about segregation. That's a more provocative way to say it, right? They wouldn't like me saying that, maybe. They're all about categorizing, segregation, segmentation, if you will, putting everything in groups. Birds of a feather flock together because they work and they look alike, they act alike, they do the same, they have all the same needs, right? If you had a group of birds, you would have a different environment for those group of birds that you had versus a group of dogs versus a group of alligators, right? You'd have a different environment, you'd have different rules, you'd have different behaviors. All of that would be different. Salesforce, first and foremost, categorizes that in terms of profiles. So you think about your users and what they can see and what they can do. There's a lot of information here. Profiles are a way to group users together. You can categorize users by profile. A profile, how I think about it is, it's the uniform that everybody wears in your organization. So I have a military background. You have a military background to some degree?
No, military spouse.
But you know enough to know there are the Navy, Army, Air Force, Coast Guard, and then the Marines are part of the Navy, right? So you know there's different there's the Department of Defense, but under that there's, right, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, Space Force now, right? So I look at profiles like the uniform you wear, right? If you wear a Navy uniform, you're probably going to do more with boats than if you're wearing an Army uniform. Does that make sense?
Yes.
If you're wearing an Air Force uniform, you're probably going to do more with flying things. And if you're a Space Force, you're going to do more with flying things higher, right? Because it's a big sweeping uniform. So that's one way to group people, but not everybody in the Army does the same job, right? So there are different roles people play. There's different public groups, and there's queues. All are hierarchical. They affect users. If you look at the way this is done in the category of users, these are all the things that affect users. Now, permission sets and permission set groups are like a subset of your uniform. I like to think of permission sets. I mean, permission sets are things that you add to your uniform. And if a bunch of people add the same thing to their uniform, let's take the Marines, and you got a bunch of guys who are infantry Marines, then they're going to get the backpack of a rifleman. Versus if you're a tanker Marine, you're still wearing the same uniform, but you need tanker stuff. And every tanker needs the same set of stuff. They need a tank uniform, they need a tank helmet, which is different than you get what I'm saying, right? That's what a permission set group is. The profile says we're all wearing the same uniform, But the permission set group is like, well, we all of us in this smaller group need all of these other additional items. We're going to call that a backpack. We get that backpack. And then a few individuals might need a few specific things, like the radio man is the only one who needs a radio, right? The machine gunner is the only one that needs a machine gun. The cook is the only one that needs a spatula, right? For the most part. So you start to think in terms of, it looks like I've got users and, they've got profiles and roles, but the other things that's important are from the profile, the subset of items you need, uniform, accessories, those things is going to be in permission sets, groups. And then there's this thing called public groups and queues, which are just other groupings of users. It's another way to group users together. So you're grouping people by, sometimes you group people, because sometimes you have joint military event things that happen, right? The Navy needs to bring the Marines to the fight. So you're going to have a group that's a mix of profiles, potentially, right? You're going to, and this is not exactly how profiles are created, but you get the point of what I'm trying to make, right? There's different reasons why you would group different people together. So Salesforce operates in groupings and really in this thing called the Venn diagram. All right, now, let me grab something real quick that might explain all this stuff. We said this whole thing got started. Let me see if I have in my org, I want to check something out. Okay, so I have this person, Bell Pepper. If I change their profile from a system administrator, which is somebody can do everything, to a read-only profile, I'm changing their uniform, right? It doesn't matter what role I give them yet. Just now, I'm going to give them no role. That's one of the roles, by the way. Every user record has to have a role, and one of the roles is no role, just so you know.
Okay.
And that's another thing to play with. So I'm updating Bell Pepper, and I'm going to go from a user that can, right here I am, I'm logged in as my system admin, and I go to a user that has the uniform of, where I can go in and do whatever I want. And how do I know I can do whatever I want? Because the buttons tell me so. I can create a new lead. I can convert a lead. I can delete a lead. I can clone a lead, which means I can create, edit, and of course I can read them, right? So remember, I've got access to that record because of my profile and my role and all the things that it means. But if I log in as that Bell Pepper, who's got a read-only profile, all Bell Pepper is going to do is read. And how I know that is from the buttons on the page, fundamentally, right? As it comes to object access. So the tabs that Bell Pepper has available to it are going to maybe the same. It might all look quite alike. But the truth of the matter is, when Bell Pepper goes to look at a lead, they're going to have a very different experience in Salesforce, because even though they can see the same record, they can't necessarily do the same things. And I say that because what made the difference is not the license, is not whether they're active or not, right? Active and the license gets them in. But notice she can't do all those other things I could do. Now my screen didn't update over here, but you could see, because the screen didn't update, there's a lot more things that this profile user can do than this Bell Pepper can do. Bell Pepper only has 2 buttons. Does that make sense? So Bell Pepper can see everything, but has no license to edit, delete, or even create anything. Bell Pepper's got she's got no way to create a new record. Even on the page, the tabs page, she's got no new button.
Oh, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
So the profile is a set of licenses that each user is assigned. Now, here's my picture, and that controls what they can see and do. Generally speaking, right? That's the first level of the security model. Let me give you an example of that.
Okay.
Well, I got a great, let's see if I, hold on. I got a better, I think I can do it right here. See if I can draw here. Okay, I'm using my annotation tool on this blank little canvas. That, think about bell pepper. And Patricia, you're bell pepper's mom. Okay. So bell pepper owns this lead, Bertha Boxer. There's bell pepper. She owns that lead. Let's say Bertha Boxer is a car. Pretty awesome car, right? Let's make it a pickup truck, right? It's a 72 VW pickup, right? So bell pepper owns the car. It was given to her by your older sister, who you are annoyed by because bell pepper is only 15 years old or 14 years old. Now, let me ask you something. Where do you live in the world? What part of the world do you live in?
Oh, Texas.
Texas is great. In Texas, if you're under 18, can you own a car?
I don't think so.
No, you know why?
Because you're not an adult.
You're not a human yet. Well, you're a human-ish. You're not an adult, which means you are not allowed by law to actually own a car. Right? You could pretend to own it, but you don't really, I mean, you could own it, but who owns the car if Bell Pepper's your daughter, who really owns the car?
Her aunt, because her aunt gave it to her, or me,
No,
I guess.
you.
Yeah.
Why? Because you're the actual parent.
Yeah.
You're the adult in the household. She's required, she's tethered to you until she's what age?
18.
18.
Yeah.
Now, unlike a lot of parents in the world today, they don't understand that when a child is 18 and they leave their house, right? They're no longer responsible for that child. They no longer can control that child. That child has their own ownership rights. They can take ownership of that car. But right now, there's a couple of things going on because in theory, you know, Bell Pepper can't own that car, but in Salesforce, she can, right? So in Salesforce, Bell Pepper can own that car. You with me?
Yeah.
Because, you know, we can assign ownership where we want. What she can't do legally is what? What can she not do legally from the state's point of view with that car?
Own it.
No. Ownership is going to be, we're going to set that fight aside for a second, because now we're talking Salesforce where she can own it. But just remember, let's say she is the owner, like you signed the paperwork, blah, blah, blah. It's her car. She can actually sell it in 4 years when she turns 18, right? But for now, she owns it, but you really own it because you're the parent, right?
Right.
So now, she's 14. What's the legal driving age in Texas?
I think it's 16.
I think it is too. I think you can get a learner's permit at 15.
Yeah.
But either way, at 14, she can't drive that car. Correct? She has no license to drive that car. Nothing about your sister giving her that car or your neighbor sharing the car with her is going to allow her to drive that car. Correct?
Correct.
Because she does not have the permission to drive it. So ownership is one piece. And then operator and operation of that device is separate, right? So even though she owns the record, she still does not have the permission to operate that record. Or her only permission to operate in that record, in a car scenario, she can't drive it, but what could she do? She could be a passenger in it, right?
Yeah.
That's legal. Okay, great. So you have the ability to ride in it, but you do not have the ability to drive it, right? So
Mhm.
when it comes to vehicle operation, there are three fundamental permissions. You have the ability to ride in the vehicle, which is like read only. You could drive the vehicle, which is like edit.
Mhm.
And then you could sell the vehicle, right?
Yeah.
Why can you sell it? Because well, who gets to ride in the vehicle? Who gets to see the vehicle? Who gets to ride in any vehicle?
The owner.
And anybody the owner says is okay to ride in your vehicle. Who can ride in your vehicle? Anybody you say is okay to ride in your vehicle, correct? You
Mhm.
could pick up a hitchhiker or you could not. It's your choice as an owner, correct?
Yes, correct.
Do you normally let anybody ride in your vehicle?
No.
You normally choose, right? There's certain groups of people that can always ride in your vehicle. There's
Mhm.
certain groups of people that can even drive your vehicle. Are you married or do you have somebody you live in the house with that is an
Yeah.
adult?
Yeah.
Right?
Married. Uh-huh.
So if you own a car, you might not like it when they drive it, but they still have the right to drive a car in your household, right?
Yes.
So there's owner and there's operation. Even though Bell Pepper is the owner of that vehicle, she does not have the license to do all the things that a typical owner like you, the parent, can do with that vehicle, right? You, the parent, can ride in it, you can drive in it, but as the parent, you can own it. Why? I mean, you can sell it. Why can you sell it as the parent of Bell Pepper's 14-year-old Bell Pepper's car that your sister gave her that you're annoyed with?
Because I'm an adult.
Because you're the adult in the household. And the law of the land says you can. Now, you'll have a horrible next 4 years if you do that. But hey, so will she. Right?
Yeah.
This is how the security model works in Salesforce. So the first thing is so there's a couple of things we talked about. Access to, first and foremost, the organization. Access to the organization. Whoops, let me stop annotating. I'm going to clear. No, I'm going to leave it. Let's see if I can leave it. Oh, wait, or maybe, hold on. All right, so access to the organization is first and foremost controlled by your license and whether your user record's active. And then your profile controls the tabs, the apps,
Okay.
the tab, and the apps control the tabs. And then, but every profile controls the apps. If we'll look at a profile in just a second. I don't think she can actually see it. But when you look at a profile, you'll see so the apps, the tabs, and the permissions of what you can do with that inside that object. So Bell Pepper can't edit, can't delete this object because she's not old enough.
Right.
You might own it. In this case, I'm going to pretend she owns it, right? So does that first analogy make sense so far? Like when you're getting the idea of what the record and the permissions have in common, like the profile and the record, like ownership and access to the record, access to that vehicle, the operation of it is going to be controlled no matter who owns that vehicle by the profile.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
No matter how many cars she's given, Bell Pepper can become a pop star and her business manager may buy her because you've signed a contract with the business manager may buy her hundreds of cars. She still can't drive them. She still can't sell them. She's not legal. She doesn't have a license to do it. So no matter what else happens, she's still 14 in the state of Texas. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So she can't do certain things. That's always going to be the truth in Salesforce. If I say Bell Pepper cannot edit a lead, there's no way in the whole ecosystem she's going to be able to edit a lead. It's just not going to happen. She doesn't have a license to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just like a user that's not active can't access your organization. Now, let's take it a few steps further. in Salesforce. If you, for some reason, live for whatever reason this is, I don't know why you would do this in Texas or anywhere in the world, but okay, you live with your parents too. For some reason, you still live with your parents too. Come on, draw. Wait, no, draw. Right? Your parents, and in this Texas, it's Salesforce as Texas, your parents inherit the same ownership rights as does Bell Pepper have, because Bell Pepper owns the car, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so if Bell Pepper owns the car and you're her parent, you own the car.
Yeah.
And your parent owns the car, and their parent owns the car, and so on and so on and so on. That's what the role hierarchy does with records.
Mhm.
It takes ownership and rolls it up the chain of command.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It takes that record access and rolls it up the chain of command. Everybody owns that record. Everybody owns that record. But I got a question for you. Your father is old, and the state of Texas took away his license to drive. Operation. It took away his license to drive. He can no longer edit that record. He can still read it, right? He can still ride in the vehicle, but he's no longer allowed to drive it. So he cannot edit it whatsoever, but he still owns it. Now, if he doesn't have the license to edit it, he won't, I'm going to get too crazy here, but basically he can read it, but he can't drive it. As an owner, technically, one of the cell permission is called transfer for leads and cases. It's called transfer, but that's the only place it lives. But that's the word you want to key in on.
Okay.
But could he sell it? I want to test it, but technically speaking, he should be able to sell it. Why? Because he owns it. He just doesn't have the ability to edit it. He might or might not have the ability to delete it. We got to look and see. But as far as changing ownership, the transfer capability, that there's a button called change owner in a lead.
Oh.
He would have the ability, I believe, if we go check that one, to change owner.
Oh, there
That button would be available. He can't drive it. He can't edit it. He can't delete it, but he can change owner. Yeah, turns out because he's an owner.
Oh.
Because that's a record owner has what's called full access, full privilege, but the role hierarchy rolls that ownership up the chain. But again, if grandpa doesn't have a license to drive a car anymore, he can only be a passenger.
Yeah.
Right? But he could still change ownership. Why? Because he's still your grandfather.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. He's
All right.
the owner. So yeah.
The last little piece of record ownership is this. If you share the record with your neighbor, if you share your car with your neighbor, whoops. How can, right? You want to share your record with the neighbor. Go back to the tab where I have leads tab. I got a little white space here. If I share this record with your neighbor, what are the things that the neighbor can do? Can the neighbor sell your car? The operations, right? We're talking about operations. Is your neighbor allowed to sell the car? If you lend your car to your neighbor, do they have the right to sell it?
No.
What are the two rights? That's right. So they don't have there's no way they're going to be able to transfer ownership because, right? Which you could also say they can't delete it either. They can't transfer ownership or delete, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, whoops, I got that all wacky. So what could they do? they could read it or they could edit it. We're calling edit drives, right? So the edit permission, if you share this vehicle with your neighbor, they can either be a passenger or they could be a driver, depending on what you've allowed them to do. So if you give your keys to the neighbor and say, you're licensed to drive the car, go ahead, they can go drive your car with your permission, correct?
Mm-hmm.
That's called sharing a record.
Okay.
Right? But that's your adult neighbor. This is the parent.
Yeah.
What if you share it with that parent's child who's also 14? What can they do as terms of operation?
Be a passenger.
That's it. They can only ride in it, right? They can only read in it, even if you say, here are the keys. Just like your sister said, here's the title, she still can't do anything with it. All she can do is read it. But she owns it. So she can actually read it and ask you to transfer technically. But you get my point, right? Just like Grandpa. He can only read it because his profile only allows him to do that. So even if you share the car with the neighbor's kid, you give the kid the keys, they cannot legally drive it. No matter if you say it's okay or not. My mom let me drive when I was 12. Didn't make it legal just because I was 5'10" and I could reach the pedals and drive by the time I was 12. She just made it easy, right? We broke the law. My mom was good for that, right? I'm talking legally now, right?
Right.
So legally, you can share a record with somebody. You could say, here are the keys, but if they don't have the license to, they don't have the license to, that's a key, by the way. It's an old key, right? If they don't have the license, they still can't do what you said they could do.
Right.
Just because you say it doesn't mean it can happen. Just because the rules say Grandpa has ownership rights doesn't mean his profile gives him right to do it. He doesn't have the license to do it. Even though he's older and he owns it and he's old enough to sell it, he still, like the daughter, can only do what the profile says you can do. You can only do what you have a license to do.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
And I got one last example for that to show. Yeah, go ahead. Ask your question.
So I was just gonna ask, what's the difference between like a sharing rule and manual sharing?
Nothing. Well, there's one difference. Let me show you in a sec. I'm going to show you in this. I have a slide that a trainer just gave me that I'm going to show you real quick, and that'll wrap up our session. Any questions you have to do it. But I hope this has been valuable for you and everybody who's watching it, right? So whoever's watching, this will be a good recording. I'll edit it and make myself look a lot smarter later. Because I do this in class a lot.
Okay.
But I'm gonna clear my annotations. Unfortunately, I'm gonna save my annotations. All right. That's good news. Now I just need this graphic to show up. Because ultimately, all of this is pretty awesome.
Yes, yes.
In terms of like, this explains everything except for, okay. Oh, perfect. All right. Good. Let me go to, I'm gonna do a new share. And we'll this one. All right, perfect. So you see this now?
Yes.
I'm gonna present it. Let's see. What are you seeing? Are you seeing the back end of the PowerPoint or the front end of the PowerPoint?
The front end? What do you mean?
Are you looking at the graphic, or are you looking at the graphic plus a bunch of other stuff?
Yeah, both. All of it.
You're looking at everything, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Let me swap displays now. How about now? Just the graphic?
No, I still see everything.
I mean, do you see end of slideshow?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I see that too. And I see click to add notes. Yeah.
Okay, I just want to see the graphic. So
Okay.
do you see just the graphic now?
There we go. Yes. Yes.
Okay, that's what I want to get to. All right. So this is the whole security model. So the first thing is whether you have object permissions is first. That's controlled by the profile, right? So the profile controls access to the object. So whether you can create, read, edit, or delete is true by object. There's whether your daughter owns the car or not, whether it was shared with her or not, all she can do is read. All she can do is ride in that car, read in it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
That's all controlled by the profile everywhere, no matter what, no matter what, no matter what, right? The profile plus the permission set are the user's entire ability to create, read, edit, or delete inside of an object. So whether grandpa owns it or not, right? You as the parent, if you got the full license, you can do everything because you own it, right? Ownership means whatever license you have, you can do, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And that ownership is what we use. That's what we call full access. Whoa.
Oh.
That's what full access is. The owner has full access to the record. The owner's got full access and in a private model. So all of record access only matters if you've restricted the access through the OWD.
Okay.
The organization-wide defaults being set. So, but first and foremost, the profile restricts access to the record based on whatever that profile permission is. So the profile is the first and foremost. Now, when you don't OWN a record, that access is set by the OWD. The organization-wide defaults is organization-wide. If you want to restrict the access to that car to one person in the world, you have to restrict it to everybody in the world in your org. You restrict access to one record, you restrict access to all users in that record. Does that make sense? That's what the organization-wide default means. It means the owner of the record is the only person that can access that record.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So the first level of override is the role hierarchy. Yeah, but my daughter's 14. She can't really own a car, so I do. And the grandparent, the great-grandparent, the role hierarchy grants full access all the way up the chain. Now, the truth of the matter is territory management is not going to be on your test, but it's basically the same thing. You control access through a hierarchy or an assignment basis, right? So you're giving, it's a very flexible rules. It's advanced. Don't worry about that one.
Okay.
The next way is, do you share the record outside your household? Think about role hierarchy as your household, right? Now I want to share that record outside my household. I use rules to do that. And here's the key thing with rules. Rules are always a group of records with a group of users. It's always the same. It's a rule, right? Every member of National Car Rental can use, in good standing, can use a car from National Car Rental. Correct?
Yeah.
If you're not a member of National, you can't walk on their lot, even though there's keys in the car, and drive off with a car. That's called stealing, right?
Yeah.
So it's a group of records with a group of users. It's always the same, always. There's no exceptions to that rule. Make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the last way to share is manual sharing.
Okay.
Now, manual sharing has two forms: individual records with individual sharing groups or users, or teams. but sharing is always, I call it S to S. It's selected records. It's selected record. Why does this keep doing that? It's select records with select users,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
It's a select group of it's either a select individual record or a select set of records
Okay.
that you can you share with different users. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So that's where teams, and there's only 3 teams in Salesforce: account, opportunity, and case team.
Okay.
But it's individual records. It's one record at a time. You decide this.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
One record at a time. This is a group of records. This is a whole hierarchy of records based on role. And then the profile comes back into play when it comes to individual fields.
Okay.
A profile can remove or add individual fields, can control the access to individual fields. So you got access to the object, the record, object, the record, or the field. That's what this is. These are the 3 buckets of access:
Okay.
object, record, and field.
Got it.
Does that help?
Yeah, no, it does help a lot. Thank you.
And so when you think about the car example, and you start to think about, you know, what records can I own? What can I do with them? What happens if I do this? Can I do that? Like if I share a record with you, a neighbor, if I share my car with you as a neighbor, I'm either sharing it as a passenger or a driver. And in Salesforce, that's read only or read write access, right? So whenever I share, the most that that person can do is either read or write. They do not have the ability to do anything else. They cannot transfer ownership of that record. So that makes that that may help you figure out like why certain things work the way they do.
Yeah.
In a rule where even if now remember, your neighbor's got a license to drive a car, but when they jump in an Uber or your car, they don't have the permission to drive that car, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so hopefully what that tells you is, okay, so even if my dad has ownership, he can transfer ownership. But if I share a record with somebody, even if what it'll look like is, if in a private model, if I share a record with another user, because they're outside my role hierarchy, they're outside my family, they may have the button to edit and they may have the button to delete. But if I only shared read-only access, that's the most restrictive thing. That's the law of the land. They can't, even with a license, my neighbor can't sell my car or my neighbor can't drive the Uber. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it. So that, to me, if you can relate to it and think about all those scenarios about all those scenarios, kind of, I think, can kind of help you understand what happens with records when in the real world, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No.
So now look, in practical application, it's a hard puzzle to figure out, right?
Yeah.
But there's a question on the test that says something about, you know, if you got a new object, and you only want these 2 groups of users to have access to the object, and you want the main group of users to be able to edit all the records, and this executive group of users, they should only be able to read read all the records? Have you heard of that question before? You see that one?
It sounds familiar, yeah.
Yeah. How do you do it? Easy. You just only you set the OWD to public read write so that ownership doesn't matter. So in a ownership model, let me go to the sharing settings real quick because this is where it matters. There's a couple things about the sharing settings. Whoops. In the sharing settings, this is where you set the OWD. What happened was my Trailhead playground didn't like being logged in as Bertha. And then it didn't like, and it wanted me to log back in. So in the sharing settings, because it's the same, the OWD sets a default level of access. So when it comes to a lead, if it's public read write, public read only, or private, that determines whether or not other users, what limit, it's like a governor on a car, right? It restricts access to records no matter what their profile says. So it's an ownership model versus, public model, public versus private versus hybrid, somewhere in between, right? So most organizations are hybrid. Anyway, so the access to the object. Now there's no, I don't have any custom objects in here. Well, it's all new stuff. Okay. So that's where you set the defaults. The rules are the first override to the restriction. I'm sorry, the role is the first override to the restrictions. You notice in the organization-wide defaults, it says grant access using hierarchy. So you're saying the role hierarchy for this object allows for grandpa to own the record too. That's true for all standard objects. For custom objects, you can toggle that. You can turn that on or off. So if you have a salary object, you can remove the access through the hierarchies. So your dad or your granddad doesn't get access. The same thing with sharing rules. You can control in a sharing rule, you can also control whether the role is so the sharing rules are, it's either going to be based on who owns the record or the condition of the record. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So those are two qualifications. First, by how do you decide if you're sharing a record? Right? So what type of rule is it? Ownership rule or criteria? And then who you share it with is going to be a group. And there's two public groups or groups you make up by roles subordinates or individual users. Roles are the groups that the role hierarchy creates, and then the role subordinates. But you have roles in the role hierarchy and then them and their subordinates. Those are all groups, right? And so you've even got a default group for users, but you could, even though you have a private model on an object, you could say, I'm gonna share this read only with everybody. So why didn't you make it read only? Well, because I still want to restrict access some other, like there's some of the reason why that's the recipe you use for it. But the idea is I want to share it with a role, right? And if it's based on owner, I could say, well, it's a private, they added queues. So you can add groups, queues. So it's a who owns it based on ownership, like how you decide what determines the group of records and then the group of users. But it's a group, all rules are group to group. That's what this is. Is it a group of records based on who owns it or a group of records based on criteria? And then who do you share it with is going to be a group, because all three of these things are groups, right? Yeah. And then how much level of access you give them is the rule. So if they've got a license to drive, but you're jumping in an Uber, then Uber only says you can only be a passenger, right? So no matter what their personal user record says about them, they're still limited by the rule. The most restrictive set of permissions and rules always applies.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yes. Yes.
Awesome. And I know that's like Pontificus Maximus. Like that's we covered a lot of ground. Oh wait, I thought I was sharing my screen. Oh my goodness, I wasn't sharing my screen with you.
You were, yeah.
I was looking at a rule. I'm like, yeah, you should know that about me. Sometimes I forget.
No, I've been writing notes down this whole session, so
Okay.
that's very helpful.
Yeah, but I'll have a recording of it posted on my YouTube channel after.
Okay, good.
I'm going to edit it a little bit first. Anyway, does that help? So when you look at, I thought you were looking at it. So the OWD sets the default for everybody in the organization. And role hierarchy, when you click on edit in the OWD, I thought I was sharing, I apologize. You can't control for standard objects whether you can share with hierarchies or not, but you can with custom objects. So that's why they'll do that. And then the rule is just that, the rule, and that's what I'm saying, go click on it, because the rule itself will be based on who owns. The first thing is, well, how do you define the group of records? Is it an ownership or criteria? How am I grouping these records? Okay, I'm doing my ownership, then great. Who owns it? A queue, a role, roles, or a public group?
Okay.
And then who am I sharing it with? Is a public group. And then how much access am I giving them? Is either read only or read write. And then that allows for you to control that sharing access. And then of course, teams allow for individual records. And of course, manual sharing is always done at the record itself. I'll show you this real quick. When you go to share a record, if you even have to do it, it doesn't matter right now, because you know why? We don't have, there's no restriction. So there's no reason for Salesforce to give us a way to share. So let me do this real quick. Let me make this private. Yeah. I'll make it private. I'm making them private anyway. All right. So
Okay.
yeah. Do your thing. So
Oh,
yeah, I gotta make them the same. Let me just leave it controlled by parent. So what it's actually doing when you rewrite the records, it's literally putting the information about each record. It's setting up a list of who can access that record.
okay.
It's literally doing that on each one. So if I go to a lead now, it's going to take a minute before this actually shows up. Oh, it showed up already. So there's my sharing button. And I can see who has access to this record is me, the owner. I've got full access. If I want to add somebody, I can decide. I'm doing the same thing. Who am I adding? The only difference is I can share this record with Bell Pepper. I can share it with a role called CEO, right? I could share it with a role and subordinate of the channel sales team, whoever I want to share it with, and then whatever level of access I want to give them. And right? That's a great way to look at it in Classic, by the way.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Who's got access? Well, this user has full access because they're the owner. And I don't think there's anybody above me in the role hierarchy, but if there was, where's my, I get to my user details, my feed. Nope. Trying to go about it a different way. Let's see if I can go to my settings. And no, I just got this set up. Sometimes I forget how to get to places, or I'm always just curious. Like I try to figure out where they're at. Let's see if it does this. If I can put myself in a different role. First, I'm going to edit Bell Pepper. I'm going to put her in a CEO role. I'm just swapping roles right now.
Okay.
And then I'm going to take myself. And I'm going to put myself as a marketing team role. So now when I go look at that lead, and I look at the sharing settings, I know I'm going fast, but
No,
sorry.
you're fine.
So there, let's see. Da-da-da. I manually shared it with that. Let's see. I'm going to delete her as a user. I'm deleting all my shares. Let's see if I can add. Let's see. All right. So I clicked expand the list. Now, why does Bell Pepper have full access to the record now?
You made her role. You made
Exactly. And it's a standard object. She's got full access. So in Classic, you can go look at it and see it happen in real life.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. Yeah.
And I bet you we can go to the account and do the same thing. Yep, there she is, full access. Why?
Yeah.
Because she's above me in the role hierarchy.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a in-depth expression, but I think the car analogy really helps people too. Does that help you?
Yeah. No, I like the car analogy as well. Yeah.
In my classes, I'll say to people, hey, it's my motorcycle. You can't ride it. Everybody understands that. No motorcycle owner lets anybody just do it, ride their bike.
Got it. Yeah. No, this was really informative. Thank you.
All right, good. I'm glad. I hope this is not an easy tackle, right? Always. So
That's why it's always good to hear other people's explanation also, because it doesn't always click.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Good. I'm glad it helps.
No, yeah, thank you. Thank you for spending your Saturday morning doing this. It's pouring over here, so we stayed indoors anyways.
It's pouring. Oh, good.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I'm glad you liked it.
Yes, thank you.
I will send everybody a link. I think what I'm going to do, I'm setting up my marketing, by the way, is why I'm doing this. I think that's part of what I'm doing.
Okay.
Are you part of the you're part of the Super User Academy, right?
Yeah. I signed up maybe 2 weeks ago, but I haven't had much time to tackle in, but yeah, I'll definitely.
So if you go through so a couple things about the class.
Okay.
I recommend, I don't know, however you like to do it, but as I go through the trails, I give deeper explanations about each topic.
Okay.
What I don't have in my training site is so there's a couple reasons. I might take this out of the recording. Couple reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing. I am, I think I charge what, $19 for this class?
Yeah.
My goal is to charge $1,900, just so you know.
Oh, okay.
But what I'm committed to right now is to deliver $1,900 worth of value.
Okay.
So that you could say, oh yeah, if I'd have paid $2,000 for that, that'd have been worth it. Like, I don't have to pay $5,000, right? But I can pay $2,000, and that's a good deal. And it's better than giving somebody else $500 or $100, all those other things. And I don't think I'm the only one that does it, but this is really designed for corporate clients. I'll take them through, and my real goal is becoming corporate clients will pay, and I have the skills to build corporate level training classes for these things. I'm just giving this a try because I want feedback about the recordings and stuff that you get there. So in the recordings, when you're looking at the product itself in the membership, I'm gonna go here so you can look at what it looks like. Let's see. Oh yeah, I think I have some of the like it's just YouTube videos, right? I don't have, and this particular tool that I'm using doesn't give me the ability to gather comments, and it doesn't have a social component to this doesn't have a social component to the to the instruction. It's one of the limitations of the tool that I used. And, but as you go through, if you have any questions about it, if you just watch it on, whoops. YouTube, if you go to YouTube to watch it, I think it's,
I do. Yeah, I can't watch it on your site, but then I can watch it on YouTube.
okay, great. So here's my request, right?
Mhm.
When you go to YouTube, if you got a question, just put it in the comments.
Okay.
Because if you put in the comments, a couple things will happen. One, I'll get notification,
Okay.
but I've got my org set up to create a case every time you create a comment,
Okay.
so that I actually can track your questions and comments. And then if you would, like, the only thing I request is that you put like a little timestamp of where it was. Because my goal is to take and edit these videos to where I'll either cherry pick, I'll have something for the editor or whatnot. But if you go to the channel and you add a comment,
Mhm.
that'll send me an email and create a case. Now I got to test that. I got to make sure, I'm going to make sure that's true right now. But that's the way to do it, is to just watch that video. Does it not play in the thing?
No, so it says that the video is unavailable. Watch this video on YouTube.
I must have done something.
That's what happens when I click on it, at least.
Well, it's clearly.
Yeah,
you're
but
not
I mean,
doing it.
I can watch it on YouTube, no issues at all. It says playback on this website has been disabled by the video owner.
That might be me.
Yeah.
I might have done that. I've been known to make changes to settings before. So, all right, good. Well, that's, hey, see, that's the kind of feedback I need,
Okay.
So I will, make that happen. So perfect. All right. Well, listen. So look, here's my big question for you though.
Okay.
When are you taking the test?
So I plan on at least by June the 1st, like give me 4 weeks.
Okay, good. That's a good time. Nothing better than a deadline. Nothing better than a deadline. So, good.
I just really like, and then before I take the exam again, my second try, so I said my first try was in November. Now, I will take the $20 like web assessor practice exam, because I found a coupon code. So yeah.
Good. It's by the way, you could take my assessment.
And yeah, I want to do that too.
My assessment doesn't cost you anything, and it's got 100 of those questions, and I don't think there's any new, because I did the class just last month. I did the web assessor thing. I recorded the video on my channel, so you can watch me take the test first. That's an explanation. Again, my goal is to gather up all those videos one day and put them in that training. So every question and answer does this thing. But the problem is, like I said, I think I'm going to start using my focus on force stuff, because they keep up. They're way better in keeping up to date all the questions and answers. So that's really useful practice. But good. Schedule the test. Schedule the test, and then just create a schedule for your studying. That's going to be the most important thing that you got.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for spending the day with me. Now I'm going to go back. It was worth it for my little super user academy. Again, the goal is that companies are the people that are Salesforce to be the admin, they need the training and the coaching and the interaction in order to really survive their job as the accidental admin, right? So my intention with this class is to provide that value, and I'm gonna let corporations pay for it. So individuals, I want to keep it, maybe individuals like you and Marivis and all, they're always gonna be $19, right? Hey, $19, because there's a lot of good information. These Q&A sessions are going to provide even more detail and even more, discussions around all that which we were talking about. And but hey, companies have a lot more on the line than just getting a certification. They've got to run their business. And believe me, I look at companies all the time, and the condition of their Salesforce is really, really unhealthy.
Oh
So,
no. Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, thanks, Patricia.
Yeah,
Thanks for being
thank
a super
you.
user, for giving a crap. That's what we really, that's starting to be my defining characteristic. Like, what's the first ingredient being a super user? Giving a crap. Like, you got to give a crap of whether or not you
Yep.
know Salesforce. And that's a super user characteristic. So thank you for being that. And then we'll turn you into the superhero you've always wanted to be as well.
Thank you so much. You have a great rest of the day, and
You too,
I
Julie.
appreciate you. Thank
Thank you.
you.
You got it. Have a great one.
You too. Bye.